Marilyn Monroe. Norma Jean Mortensen wasn't born into glamour, she was forged in the crucible of wartime America. Imagine this, a young woman, barely out of her teens, standing in the hum of a munitions factory during World War II. Her hands, stained with grease and soot, carefully sprayed fire retardant on airplane parts while America's sons fought overseas. She wasn't Marilyn Monroe yet, just another face in a sea of factory workers. Then, fate intervened. A photographer, documenting the war effort, caught her in a candid moment, her natural beauty framed by industrial grit. That photo led her to the Blue Book modeling agency, where she dyed her hair platinum blonde and rebranded herself for a world desperate for beauty amidst chaos. The glitz of Hollywood beckoned, but it was built on the back of a girl who once clocked in and out of a factory. The path she paved didn't end with her, but with another man who swapped grease paint for stardom. Todd Browning. Todd Browning's life reads like a gothic fever dream. As a teenager, he ran away to join a traveling circus. There, he became the living hypnotic corpse, a macabre act that saw him buried alive for paying crowds. Browning reveled in the bizarre, performing as a contortionist and clown in dimly lit circus tents. His time under the big top wasn't just a job. It was an education in humanity's darkest curiosities. This world of freak shows and sideshows seeped into his creative psyche, ultimately manifesting in his films like Freaks, which horrified and fascinated 1930s audiences. His life was a testament to the strange allure of the grotesque. What others shunned, Browning embraced, using his experiences to push boundaries in early cinema. His obsession with the extraordinary set him apart, just as another performer's journey was defined not by circus acts, but by a simple cigarette. Lucille Ball. Before becoming the queen of comedy, Lucille Ball was a struggling model, hawking Chesterfield cigarettes in glamorous advertisements. It's almost impossible to reconcile this glamorous facade with the struggles she endured off-camera. Fired from her job with Hattie Carnegie due to rheumatism, Ball was left to fend for herself in a city that chewed up and spat out hopefuls daily. She reinvented herself as a chorus girl, donning sparkling outfits while performing on Broadway. Her stage name, Diane Belmont, was a mask for a woman desperate to make her mark. Hollywood eventually called, but not before she learned to embrace failure as a stepping stone. Her humor was born from hardship, honed through years of rejection and reinvention. She cracked the world open with laughter, unlike the man who once stilt-walked his way into audiences' hearts. Cary Grant. Cary Grant was born Archie Leach, a name that echoed his working-class roots in Bristol, England. Before he became the epitome of sophistication, Grant balanced precariously on stilts as part of the Bob Pender stage troupe. Dressed in flamboyant costumes, he towered above crowds, his every move a testament to his agility and charm. This was no mere gimmick, it was training. His stints in vaudeville taught him the art of timing and physicality, elements that would later define his on-screen persona. Touring the U.S. with the troupe, he caught the eye of theater producers, paving his way to Hollywood. Behind the suave exterior lay a man who understood the value of performance. His charisma was practiced, his elegance rehearsed, unlike the raw vulnerability of a woman who danced her way out of obscurity. Joan Crawford. Before the name Joan Crawford became synonymous with old Hollywood glamour, she was Lucille Lesueur, a young woman carving out a future through sheer determination. She started as a chorus girl, spinning across stages in traveling revues. Her talent wasn't immediately apparent, but her ambition burned bright. A chance to star in silent films like Our Dancing Daughters propelled her into the spotlight. MGM rechristened her Joan Crawford, a name chosen by fans in a magazine contest. But beneath the glimmer of her meteoric rise lay a woman haunted by insecurity, fighting for every inch of her success. She danced through the chaos, unlike another star whose rise was forged in the grit of manual labor. Clark Gable. Before Clark Gable became the king of Hollywood, he was just a restless drifter trying to survive. He worked as a lumberjack in the Pacific Northwest, his hands raw from wielding axes, while trees crashed around him. The man who would later define cinematic elegance was once knee-deep in mud, earning pennies in grueling manual labor. He moved from the forests to oil fields in Oklahoma, where the work was no kinder. Yet, Gable's ambition burned brighter than the oil rigs he worked on. Eventually, he found himself selling neckties in a department store, using his natural charm to convince customers to part with their money. That effortless charisma would later become his signature on-screen allure, but in those early days, it was pure survival. Gable wasn't just working jobs, he was absorbing personas, perfecting the quiet confidence that would later define Rhett Butler, just like a certain German star who transformed pain into mystique. Marlene Dietrich. Marlene Dietrich didn't stumble into fame. She clawed her way out of obscurity with a violin bow in one hand and defiance in the other. Before the smoldering allure in satin gowns, Dietrich dreamed of being a concert violinist. Her musical ambitions were cut short when a wrist injury shattered those dreams. But Dietrich wasn't built for surrender. She pivoted, working in a factory to support herself. The grind of machinery, a stark contrast to the elegance she would later embody. The cabaret stage called to her, where she redefined seduction, not just with her voice, but with a calculated, hypnotic stillness. Her androgynous style blurred lines, scandalized conservative audiences, and redefined beauty on her terms. The woman in the tuxedo didn't just challenge norms, she obliterated them. And in doing so, she paved the way for another tough-talking rebel, forged not in music, but in the military. Humphrey Bogart. Humphrey Bogart's tough exterior wasn't an act, it was battle-tested. Long before he muttered hard-boiled lines in smoky rooms, he was a sailor in World War I, serving aboard the USS Leviathan. The discipline of naval life shaped him, but it wasn't the only thing that left a mark. A freak accident during his service left him with the scar on his upper lip that became part of his cinematic identity. After the war, Bogart worked as a shipper, hauling crates in a job as unforgiving as the seas he once navigated. Desperate for something better, he turned to bond sales, a soul-crushing gig he despised. Yet it was here, in the art of persuasion, where he learned the subtle tension of holding power with words alone, that simmering intensity, the barely restrained fury. It wasn't just a performance. It was a wound disguised as charisma, much like the ice-cold gaze of a certain Swedish actress who made silence her weapon. Greta Garbo. Greta Garbo wasn't born an enigma. She built the illusion brick by brick. Long before she captivated audiences with haunting stares, she was a soap-lather girl in a Stockholm barbershop, quietly preparing customers for their shaves while dreaming of something more. The mundane grind of the shop floor never fit her, so she sought work in a department store. It was there, amidst the scent of fabric and perfume, that she was discovered and cast in promotional films, her first taste of the camera's gaze. But Garbo wasn't just another pretty face. She trained rigorously at the Royal Dramatic Theatre in Stockholm, mastering her craft with a silent intensity. When MGM brought her to Hollywood, she played the game differently. No parties, no interviews, just presence. A mystery carved from precision and restraint, as unforgettable as the fiery rise of a dancer who battled his way from the back of the chorus line to the top of the credits. James Cagney. James Cagney's rise wasn't crafted in a Hollywood backlot. It began in the unforgiving streets of New York. His first taste of the working world was far from glamorous. He was a bellhop at the Plaza Hotel, lugging the bags of the elite while observing the power dynamics of wealth up close. But Cagney wasn't content carrying suitcases. His next stop was behind the scenes of the stage, working as a scenery boy, painting sets and absorbing the mechanics of storytelling. When he finally stepped into the spotlight, it was on vaudeville stages, tapping into a natural rhythm that fused dance with rebellion. Cagney's performances were electric, but his success wasn't just about charisma, it was survival. Every routine, every tap, was honed from hardship. His rapid-fire delivery and restless energy weren't just style. They were scars disguised as rhythm. And they made him unforgettable, just like the next legend who turned physical comedy into an art form. Buster Keaton. Buster Keaton didn't just master physical comedy, he survived it. At the age of 3, he was thrust into the brutal vaudeville circuit, performing alongside his parents in a slapstick act that often left him battered and bruised. His father would literally toss young Buster across the stage, and audiences roared as the child hit backdrops or landed with an unsettling thud. But Keaton didn't cry. He learned to make pain part of the performance. His trademark deadpan expression was born not from humor, but from a childhood where vulnerability was a liability. By his teens, he had become a full-fledged performer, capable of defying gravity with his stunts while remaining eerily calm. Hollywood came calling when he transitioned from vaudeville to silent film, where his daredevil antics and razor-sharp comedic timing redefined physical storytelling. Yet, behind every gravity-defying fall was a man who understood how much pain it took to make people laugh, just like the woman who shattered social norms with a raised eyebrow and a defiant smirk. Mae West. Mae West wasn't just a Hollywood provocateur, she was rebellion incarnate. Before the rhinestone gowns and double entendres, she was a teenage vaudeville performer testing the limits of decency on New York stages. At 14, she adopted the stage name Baby May, and was already mastering the art of weaponized charm. But West wasn't content with being a pretty face. She wrote her own material, penning the controversial play Sex in 1926, which led to her arrest for obscenity. Instead of shrinking under scandal, West used it as fuel. Her sexuality wasn't just bold, it was a statement. In a male-dominated industry, she seized control of her image, crafting a persona both scandalous and untouchable. When Hollywood finally came calling, she transformed every frame into a battle cry for feminine power. Her wit was razor-sharp, her control absolute, and yet behind the larger-than-life persona lay the quiet grit of a woman who refused to play by the rules. Much like a dancer who reshaped elegance with every step. Fred Astaire. Fred Astaire didn't glide into Hollywood fame, he danced his way out of obscurity. Born to Austrian immigrants, his early life was steeped in financial instability. His mother, determined to create stars, enrolled him and his sister Adele in dance lessons when they were children. Together, they formed the Astaires, a vaudeville duo that climbed the ranks, wowing audiences with their synchronized routines and effortless charm. But behind the effortless grace was relentless discipline. Fred rehearsed until his feet bled, chasing perfection not for applause, but survival. When Adele retired from performing to marry, Fred faced his most personal setback. Alone on stage, he was told by critics he was too thin and had no screen presence. But rejection fueled him. When he finally broke through in Flying Down to Rio, 1933, his blend of athleticism and grace redefined dance on film forever. Yet elegance wasn't his only legacy. He made the impossible look effortless, just like a fiercely independent actress who made her own rules. Katharine Hepburn. Katharine Hepburn wasn't born into stardom. She built it through defiance. Raised in a progressive Connecticut household where women were taught to speak their minds, Hepburn took that lesson to heart. Her early acting career was marked by repeated failure. She was fired from multiple Broadway productions for being too brash, a criticism that would have crushed lesser spirits. But Hepburn didn't crumble. She sharpened her edges. Her breakout role in A Bill of Divorcement, 1932, didn't just reveal talent. It showcased a new kind of femininity, sharp, self-possessed, and unwilling to be molded. Hollywood couldn't quite handle her. She was labeled box office poison after a string of flops. Most stars would retreat. Hepburn bought the rights to the Philadelphia story, orchestrating her own comeback. She won not just roles, but control, redefining what it meant to be a leading lady. Her defiance paved the way for another outsider who turned quiet dignity into box office gold. James Stewart. James Stewart's charm was no accident. It was forged in lecture halls and cockpit cabins. Before Hollywood, Stewart was an architecture student at Princeton, meticulously sketching blueprints and studying the physics of structure. Yet, it wasn't drafting tables that defined him, it was the stage. Princeton's theater club sparked something in him, a realization that performance, like architecture, required precision and balance. After college, he took his talent to Broadway but was quickly pulled west by the allure of film. But Stewart was more than a Hollywood heartthrob. When World War II erupted, he left the spotlight to become a bomber pilot, rising to the rank of colonel and flying dangerous combat missions over Europe. His performances, earnest, vulnerable, yet unwavering, weren't just acting. They were echoes of a man who had seen the cost of courage firsthand, and it made his return to the screen all the more powerful. Just as another Hollywood legend discovered the power of transformation, not through fame, but through labor. Boris Karloff. Boris Karloff didn't stumble into horror, he lived it. Long before the chilling makeup of Frankenstein transformed him into a cinematic legend, Karloff was a struggling actor buried under layers of rejection and grime. He worked back-breaking jobs as a ditch digger and plaster hauler while chasing elusive roles in silent films. Hollywood was unforgiving, and Karloff seemed destined to be forgotten among the endless sea of extras. But there was something haunting about him, something quietly unsettling. His dark eyes, his gaunt face, he wasn't just acting. He was channeling a lifetime of hard labor and survival into his performances. It was director James Whale who finally saw it, casting him as the monster in Frankenstein, 1931. The role required no dialogue, only raw presence. Karloff, the man who had once been invisible, became unforgettable. And yet, for all the horror he embodied on screen, another star's rise would be shaped not by shadows, but by the delicate artistry of dried flowers. Gloria Stewart. Before she was Titanic's elderly Rose, Gloria Stewart was an artist trying to survive the Great Depression by selling hand-sewn aprons. Yes, aprons. She crafted them from scratch, along with patchwork pillows and dried flower arrangements, peddling them in a small California tea shop where she also worked as a waitress. Every stitch, every bouquet, was an act of defiance against obscurity. But Gloria wasn't just stitching fabric, she was piecing together a life determined to be more. Her creativity eventually drew the attention of a local theater, where she performed on stage before being offered a film contract with Universal Studios. Yet, even under Hollywood's golden lights, she refused to be just another starlet. Stewart was politically vocal, unafraid to challenge the industry's expectations for women. Decades later, when she returned to the screen as the older Rose in Titanic, her career had come full circle, from stitching linens to etching history. Just like the next rising star who started not on camera, but behind a sales counter. James Dunn. James Dunn knew rejection intimately. Before he held an Oscar, he was just a struggling salesman, pushing lunch wagons and demonstrating automobiles with practiced charm. He wasn't chasing stardom, he was chasing survival. But Dunn had something rare: sincerity. That unpolished, everyman quality caught the attention of a Broadway producer who saw more than a salesman. He saw a performer. Dunn soon found himself in stock theater, traveling from town to town, barely scraping by. His breakthrough came in Bad Girl, 1931, where his raw vulnerability turned heads in a way even he hadn't expected. But the price of fame was steep. As his star rose, so did his battles with alcoholism, nearly derailing his career entirely. Yet, Dunn's comeback was as raw as his performances, winning an Oscar for A Tree Grows in Brooklyn after years in Hollywood's shadows. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and comment. Also, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell to get notified of our newest videos. Thanks for watching.